The wealthy CEO was about ready to throw in the towel on blind dates. That is, until she uttered the words, "You once helped my daughter." The soft light of a late autumn afternoon cast a gentle glow over the city. Golden leaves danced and twirled along sidewalks still glistening from the morning's rain. Zane Wilder sat alone inside a cafe with soaring ceilings, nestled among fancy designer boutiques and high-end art galleries. He looked every bit the man magazines loved to feature. A charcoal gray suit, tailored to absolute perfection, a silver watch gleaming from beneath a pristine shirt cuff, and posture ramrod straight, composed. Yet beneath that polished exterior, there was only emptiness. On the table before him sat a barely touched cup of espresso and a single white tulip in a slender vase. A carefully considered floral accent, a design element chosen by the cafe itself. Zane's gaze lingered on the tulip. He'd chosen white tulips for his brother's memorial. Clean, simple, silent. It had been a year since the accident, a year of going through the motions, of keeping his business, Wilder Studio, afloat, of maintaining the carefully constructed image of the visionary interior architect who designed homes that seemed to whisper peace and breathe light. No one knew the toll his calm facade took. Blind dates had been suggested, arranged, and begrudgingly tolerated for appearances, for business, or simply to placate those who couldn't grasp that some men are better off alone with their ghosts. But tonight felt different, because it was destined to be the last. "This is the last one," he murmured under his breath, tapping the edge of his porcelain cup. "After tonight, no more blind dates, no more pretending. I can't feel anything." His gaze drifted toward the expansive glass pane beside him. The reflection staring back was of a man who appeared immaculate, but Zane knew the hollowness lurking behind those eyes. A shell, an echo. The cafe buzzed softly around him. Exposed brick walls, warm wood accents, subtle brass fixtures, and the quiet hiss of steam emanating from the espresso machine. Jazz music floated in the air, comforting to some, but irrelevant to Zane. Each table was graced with a different flower arrangement. His held the solitary tulip. Poetic, perhaps. Painful, most definitely. A breeze swept in as the door opened, carrying with it the gentle click of heels on the oak floor. Zane didn't turn, but she spotted him immediately. Mira Lane stepped through the doorway, pausing for just a moment. Her pale blue dress was simple, slightly faded at the hem. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a low ponytail, a few wisps framing her cheeks. Her shoes were clean, but clearly well worn. No makeup, no perfume, just the subtle scent of rain and something green, something floral. Her eyes scanned the room, finally settling on him. Even after all this time, she recognized him. She hadn't imagined ever standing face to face with this man again. Not really, but she had certainly dreamed of it, of being able to finally say the words she never had, of showing him the face of the little girl he'd rescued from the wreckage. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Mira walked toward his table. Zane looked up as she approached. He rose from his seat automatically, out of habit rather than intention. She was unlike anyone he'd met on these forced dates. Unpolished, yes, but genuine. "Mr. Wilder," she said, her voice calm but kind. She extended her hand with a small, hesitant smile. Zane didn't take it. He offered a stiff nod, turned, and reached for his coat. The message was clear. He'd already decided to leave. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Mira froze, her hand remaining in the air for a heartbeat longer before she slowly withdrew it. She didn't blush. She didn't shrink back. Instead, she said softly but distinctly, "Wait, I think you once helped my daughter." Zane paused mid-motion, his back still to her. For a moment he didn't breathe. Then he turned around. Mira opened her bag and pulled out a worn photograph, holding it delicately with both hands. She placed it on the table in front of him. A little girl, no more than 2 years old, wearing a soot-stained pink dress. Her face was streaked with tears, her hair matted with smoke. And holding her, emerging from a mangled car, was a man, his sleeves rolled up, soot smeared across his face, arms trembling, but determined. "You were there," she said. 2 years ago, Redwood Highway. The accident. That was my daughter." Zane stared at the photo. His throat tightened. The air felt thinner, sharper. He recognized the picture. He remembered the fire. He remembered the scream that sliced through the trees, the unbearable heat, the tiny hands clawing at the window. He remembered not thinking, just running, just saving. His coat slipped from his fingers and onto the chair. He sat down slowly, unable to tear his gaze away from the image. Mira placed the photo on the table between them, her expression gentle but resolute. "You don't remember, do you?" "I try not to," he said, his voice hoarse. She offered a faint smile. "Well, maybe fate decided you should." The sunlight shifted through the window, illuminating the tulip, the photograph, and the man whose carefully constructed quiet world had just begun to crumble. Zane reached out, his fingertips brushing the edge of the picture. For the first time in months, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise. Memory. Pain, yes, but also, perhaps, a sliver of hope. The hum of the cafe continued around them, but inside the small bubble of their corner table, the world had narrowed to just two people and a shared memory neither of them could fully escape. Mira's fingers lingered on the photograph. She gently slid it back into her bag, then looked up at Zane. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was steady, but tinged with a softness, like the sound of pages turning in a long-forgotten journal. "I remember everything about that day," she began. "It was raining lightly, not much, just enough to make the road slick." Zane watched her, silent, unreadable. "I was driving back from my sister's house. Luna had just turned 2. She was asleep in her car seat behind me, clutching a toy bear she wouldn't let go of. Her hands were folded on the table, delicate and controlled. A deer ran across the road. I swerved, just instinct. I hit the guardrail and the car rolled. The next thing I knew, I was upside down, my head pounding, smoke filling the air." She paused, the memory heavy in her throat. "I remember turning, seeing her trapped behind me. The seatbelt was jammed. I tried, but the doors wouldn't budge." Zane's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "Then I smelled fuel." Mira continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "and I panicked. I think I screamed, and then I blacked out." She looked directly at him now. "When I woke up in the hospital, they told me a man had pulled her out just before the car burst into flames. They said he carried her up the embankment, handed her to the paramedics, then vanished." Zane lowered his gaze to the table. "They said he left a business card with the nurse. That was all." Mira reached into her purse again. This time, she retrieved a worn, creased card, its edges curled, the ink slightly faded, but still intact. She laid it gently on the table between them. "If she's okay," she read softly, "send a postcard." The corners of Zane's mouth twitched almost imperceptibly. He remembered writing that. His hand had been shaking, his voice raspy from smoke. He'd shoved the card into the nurse's hand and walked away before anyone could stop him. Mira looked down at it. "I kept it," she said. "I never sent a postcard. I wasn't sure what to say. What could ever be enough?" She glanced up again. "But I always told myself someday, if I ever saw you again, I'd find the words." Zane picked up the card slowly, running a thumb across the fading ink. His name embossed in silver, the email address long outdated. It looked like something from another lifetime. "I saw your face in a magazine," Mira said, her tone lightening. "A spread about minimalist architecture. You were standing in this impossibly white kitchen, arms crossed, looking like you had never run into a burning car in your life." A soft chuckle escaped her lips. "I couldn't believe it was you, but Luna recognized you, too," she said. "That's the man who saved the girl." She saw the photo and just knew. Zane set the card down again slowly. Pause followed. Then, Mira leaned forward, her voice lower now. "I never got to say thank you." The words landed gently, like a feather on broken stone. Zane didn't respond at first. He sat very still, as if any movement might shatter something fragile in the air. But when he finally looked at her, something had shifted. His eyes, once sharp and defensive, were softer now, uncertain, vulnerable. He didn't offer a speech. He didn't wave away her gratitude. Instead, he simply nodded, a slow, quiet nod, the kind that said, "I hear you. I feel it too." Outside the window, the autumn light had shifted, casting a warm golden glow across the tulip on their table. Between them lay a photograph, a card, and the weight of a moment that had refused to be forgotten. Zane leaned back slightly in his chair. For the first time in months, the heaviness in his chest lifted just a little because maybe, just maybe, saving one life had also been the thread back to his own. The scent of kettle corn and cotton candy hung in the crisp autumn air as Zane walked through the gates of the small community fair. He felt out of place, his neutral-toned wool coat and polished shoes a stark contrast to the vibrant chaos surrounding him. Kids laughing, balloons bobbing, music drifting from a nearby carousel. He scanned the crowd and spotted Mira near a crafts booth under a yellow-striped canopy. She was kneeling next to a little girl, Luna. Zane's chest tightened. She was smaller than he remembered, though he'd only seen her once, covered in soot, cradled in his arms. Now, she wore a pink dress with a tulle skirt that fluttered when she moved. Her hair was braided in pigtails, and she had a glittery unicorn sticker on one cheek. Mira looked up and waved him over with a warm smile. "Hi," she said simply. Zane nodded, still not used to how naturally she looked at him, like he was just a man, not a ghost from a tragedy. "Luna," Mira said gently, "this is Mr. Zane. Do you remember the story I told you about the man who helped you?" Luna tilted her head, studying him. Her eyes, so wide and curious, held no fear or hesitation. She didn't speak. Instead, she reached into her small backpack and pulled out a folded piece of construction paper. She held it up to him proudly. Zane took it slowly and unfolded it. Crayon lines danced across the page, a childlike drawing of a man in a blue cape standing in front of a car with flames sketched in orange and red. The man's arms were outstretched, and in them was a tiny figure in a pink dress. He stared at it. "She draws him all the time," Mira said softly beside him. "Always the same. A cape, a strong face, saving people." Zane looked from the paper to Luna, who now grinned and pointed at the figure. "That's you," she said, his voice caught. "It's really good," he managed to say. Luna beamed, then skipped off to chase bubbles floating through the air. He remained still, the drawing fluttering slightly in his hand. "You didn't have to come," Mira said gently, sensing his tension. "I know," he replied. "I almost didn't, but you did." Zane didn't respond. He watched Luna twirl near the balloon cart, her pink dress catching the sunlight. A long pause passed before he finally asked, "Why me? Why find me now?" Mira's expression softened. "Because my daughter deserves to know that the world still has men who run into fire." Zane blinked. Mira continued, her voice quiet but firm. "It's not just about gratitude, Zane. It's about what that moment meant. You didn't know us. You could have walked away, but you didn't." He swallowed hard. "You ran toward danger, and for Luna, for me, that changed everything." Zane looked down again at the drawing. Something fragile stirred inside him, an echo of the man he'd been before the grief, before the silence, a memory of being needed, not for his designs or his image, but simply for showing up. When Luna came back and tugged at his coat, asking if he wanted to see the petting zoo, Zane didn't hesitate. He held out his hand, and she took it without fear. As they walked toward the goats and rabbits, Mira followed a few steps behind, watching them with a quiet smile. For the first time in what felt like years, Zane didn't feel like a stranger in his own life. The following week, Mira invited Zane to visit the place she spent most of her days, a community library tucked between aging apartment buildings and a faded park. From the outside, it looked unremarkable, but as soon as Zane stepped inside, he felt something shift. The walls were covered in finger paintings and paper stars. Bookshelves leaned slightly under the weight of well-loved stories. A reading nook was made from second-hand armchairs and a patchwork rug, and the sound of laughter drifted from a nearby classroom. "This is where you work?" Zane asked, taking it all in. Mira smiled. "It's where I breathe." He followed her into a room marked STEM Lab, though the label felt a bit ambitious. Inside, 5 or 6 kids hunched over a table, working with construction paper, glue, and old batteries. Mira crouched beside them, guiding one boy as he tried to make a paper robot stand upright. "Try folding the legs like this," she said, demonstrating. Her fingers were gentle but sure. Zane watched from the doorway, strangely still. Mira was in her element here. There was no trace of the cautious woman from their first meeting, only energy, purpose, and joy. One girl tugged at Mira's sleeve. "Miss Mira, look, mine has wings." "Perfect." Mira beamed, high-fiving the child. "Now he can fly to space and back." The room was cluttered, the lighting dim, and the tables scratched from years of use. But Zane had never seen a place so alive. After the class ended and the kids filed out with sticky hands and proud smiles, Mira turned to him. "Thanks for coming," she said. "I know it's not exactly your world." Zane looked around again. It should be. That night he stayed awake sketching, not for a client, not for a magazine feature, but for this room. 3 days later, Mira returned to the library after a morning meeting. She carried her usual tote bag and a thermos of lukewarm coffee, expecting the usual chaos. But when she opened the STEM lab door, she froze. The entire space had been transformed. New lighting panels bathed the room in soft, natural light. Custom-designed tables stood in curved rows, built for small arms and eager minds. The shelves were reorganized with clear labels. On one wall, a mural depicted rockets, circuits, and a tree made of glowing gears. In the center of it all was a new sign. Imagination Lab. Mira stood motionless. "I hope that's okay," Zane said quietly, stepping in behind her. She turned to face him, her eyes already brimming with tears. "You did this?" He nodded. "I saw what you were doing here, what it could be. I just wanted to help it breathe." She looked around again, overwhelmed. "Zane, this is beautiful. This is beyond anything we could have hoped for." Zane smiled softly. "I design for people," he said. "This time I wanted to design for hope." The kids arrived moments later, running in with gasps and shrieks of delight. They ran their fingers along the walls, explored the new corners, and claimed their favorite seats as if they'd always belonged there. Mira stood beside Zane, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. And Zane, for the first time in a long while, felt like he had built something that truly mattered. The field trip had started as a picture-perfect spring morning. The sun was spilling gold all over the hills of the local nature preserve, warming up the soft grass. The kids from the library's community program were darting around between the wildflowers and the trees. Their laughter carried on the breeze as they chased after butterflies, flew their handmade kites, and tossed paper airplanes shaped like birds. It was the kind of day Mira absolutely loved, just bursting with color and innocence, with a rare feeling of peace in the air. She walked right alongside Zane, clipboard in hand, just occasionally checking off names as she pointed out different plants and trails. He listened closely, nodding as she went on about how much the kids' confidence had grown since they'd renovated the Imagination Lab. The warmth of the sun, the softness of her voice, all that playful joy buzzing around them. It all just created this rare kind of quiet in Zane's chest, just a moment where he didn't feel so crushed under the weight of his grief. And then, all of a sudden, Mira's voice just changed. "Luna," cracked right in the middle of her daughter's name. Zane turned around just in time to see that pink dress of Luna's, just a blurry flash way too far ahead, her tiny self chasing after a feather that was drifting in the breeze. The slope she was on, it was steeper than it looked, and the grass, still damp from the morning dew, was gleaming almost like silk. In a heartbeat, Luna's foot slipped right out from under her. She went tumbling forward, letting out a soft, startled little cry. The whole world seemed to tilt off its axis. "Luna!" Mira shouted out, panic tightening up every word. But Zane, he was already running. He charged down that hill, gravity just pulling him down with every step. His shoes were slipping all over that slick grass, his suit jacket whipping out behind him like some kind of crazy cape. For just a moment there, time seemed to bend. Everything slowed down but the pounding in his feet, the rolling of Luna's tiny body, and the giant tree trunk that was just looming right up ahead. She was going to hit it hard. Zane just launched himself forward, stretching out every muscle in his body, every last bit of instinct. He caught her just in the nick of time, wrapping his arms all the way around her, twisting his own body around so that his back would take the brunt of the fall. They crashed down to the earth with a dull thud, muffled by the grass and the sheer breathlessness of it all. Zane gasped for air as he felt the wind get knocked right out of his lungs. But his arms, they never loosened their grip. Luna was sobbing now, just clinging to him, trembling all over. Her little fists were clutching at the collar of his shirt like she'd done it 1,000 times. "It's okay, little one," Zane murmured softly, his voice low and steady, even though he was shaking like a leaf himself. "I've got you again." He held her as carefully as if she was made out of porcelain. His palm cradled the back of her head. His other arm was wrapped around her spine, just steady and solid as a rock. There was dirt smeared all over his cheek, with blades of grass clinging to his clothes. But his focus, it never wavered. Mira ran toward them, her legs just shaking with every step she took. She fell down to her knees beside them. Her heart was pounding like a drum, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her hands reached right out toward her daughter, but then they just paused when she saw how tightly Luna was clinging to Zane. "Zane," she breathed out, her voice just breaking into pieces. He looked up, and in his eyes, there was just something that stilled her completely. Not fear, not shock, not even plain relief. It was love, just unspoken, so raw, so fierce, the kind of love that doesn't even wait around for permission. Mira touched Luna's back so gently, brushing those messy strands of blonde hair away from her flushed cheeks. The girl was hiccuping through her sobs, burying her face even deeper into Zane's chest. "She's okay," Mira whispered to him, her voice just shaking badly. "She's just scared is all." Zane nodded his head, his jaw clenched up tight. "I know," he just said. For one long moment, they just stayed right there. Zane down on one knee in the grass, Luna safe and sound in his arms, and Mira right there by their side, one hand resting gently on each of them. The other kids, they'd all stopped playing now. The chaperone just stood there silently, watching them all from a respectful distance. Finally, Luna stirred. She looked right up at Zane, her eyes still all glossy with tears, her voice just a tiny whisper. "You came again." Zane smiled so softly, pressing a kiss to the top of her hair. "Always." Mira felt something inside of her shift, just settle into place. The man who'd once saved her daughter from a fire had now just caught her from falling. Not once had he even hesitated for a moment, and now something deeper was just connecting them, not just simple gratitude, not just admiration, but a real recognition of a bond that was way too strong to even think about ignoring, of a family that was starting to form, just one act of pure love at a time. That evening, Mira invited Zane over to her place. The house was quiet, small, but so warm. It was the kind of space that just felt lived in, where every single creak in the floorboards just held a memory. Soft jazz was playing from an old speaker tucked away in the corner of the kitchen, the sound just mellow and comforting. The lights were dimmed down low, casting a warm golden glow all over the butcher block countertops, highlighting the edges of all those mismatched mugs and chipped plates that were stacked up neatly on the open shelves. Zane was sitting at the kitchen island, his hands wrapped all the way around a ceramic mug that was filled up with herbal tea that Mira had brewed for him herself. Across from him, she was leaning on her elbows, her chin resting lightly on one hand, her eyes watching that steam just curl up into the air between them. "I haven't had someone over in a while," she said so softly. Zane just gave her a faint little smile. "Me neither." There was no awkwardness to the silence that followed, just a shared space that was filled with just pure respect. Then, Mira took a slow, deep breath. Her gaze dropped down to the edge of the counter. "Luna's dad, he left the very day that I told him I was pregnant." Zane's expression just shifted, so subtle, but totally attentive. "He told me that he wasn't ready for that kind of life, for that kind of responsibility." She went on, her voice was steady enough, but it was low. "Disappeared inside of a week. No phone calls, no letters, he was just gone." She traced around the rim of her mug with her finger. It was more of a grounding motion than something idle. "I was scared, I'm not gonna lie, but mostly I was angry. I told myself I didn't need him, that I'd be everything that Luna would ever need. She paused, her eyes drifting off toward the small framed photos hanging up on the far wall. One of them was of a toddler in a pink dress, just smiling from ear to ear through a mouthful of birthday cake. And for a little while there, I was right up until that accident happened. Right up until you showed up. Zane's gaze just softened right up, just waiting there for her. That day, Mira said, her voice just quieter now. When I saw someone running straight toward the fire instead of away from it, something just broke wide open inside of me. I didn't even know your name then, but I remembered your eyes. I remember thinking to myself, maybe not all men leave us in the end. Her voice just wavered a little bit then. Zane looked down at his tea, and then he spoke, his voice low and careful. My brother, Leo, he was 27 years old. He was the best of us, just brighter, kinder, better. He believed in everything, especially in me, he really did. He paused for a second. His jaw was clenched lightly. 2 years ago, I asked him to help me with sourcing all the materials for some kind of custom design I was working on. He really didn't have to do that. It was getting late, but he came over to help me anyway. There was just some drunk driver, wrong lane. He never even made it home that night. Mira's breath hitched, her posture snapping upright, her eyes welling with empathy. I blamed myself, Zane admitted, his voice barely a whisper. Still do. After that, I just couldn't design for people anymore. I started designing for magazines, hotels, things that didn't feel, things that couldn't be hurt. He finally looked up, his gaze locking onto hers. I stopped letting anyone in, Mira. I convinced myself that if I dared to care again, I'd just end up losing again. And I couldn't. I wouldn't survive that. Mira reached across the countertop, her fingertips lightly brushing against his. You saved Luna, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. But I think you saved something inside me too, Zane. Something I didn't even realize was broken. Zane didn't respond with words. Instead, he simply turned his hand over and enveloped hers, his grip steady and reassuring, his skin radiating a comforting warmth. The silence that stretched between them was no longer the hollow, echoing void of loneliness. It was now a comforting stillness, pregnant with unspoken understanding, a shared recognition of pain and the budding possibility of something more. Two people, both once shattered and irrevocably changed by profound loss, were tentatively reaching for one another, finding a fragile solace and a tender, hesitant awakening in the subdued, comforting glow of a warm kitchen. They were finally, painstakingly, beginning the long, arduous process of healing, together. For what felt like an eternity, Mira hadn't heard so much as a peep from Zane. No text messages pinging her phone, no unexpected calls shattering the silence. Not even a simple acknowledgement of Luna's crayon-covered thank you note. A note that Luna had painstakingly crafted with every ounce of love her small, innocent heart could possibly muster. She fought tooth and nail against the nagging urge to take it personally, whispering quiet reassurances to herself, trying to rationalize his silence. He's probably just swamped with work, she'd tell herself. Or maybe he just needs some space to breathe, to sort things out in his own head, to process everything. But deep down, nestled in the pit of her stomach, a dull, persistent ache resonated in her heart, a painful reminder of her own vulnerabilities. She had, after all, witnessed the spark return to his eyes, that flicker of hope that had seemed hopelessly extinguished for so long. She had felt the delicate tendrils of warmth beginning to intertwine between them, a fragile connection that she had instinctively cherished. And now, it felt as though it had vanished once more, leaving her adrift in a vast and unforgiving sea of uncertainty. One evening, after tucking Luna snugly into bed, her mind still racing and her anxiety simmering just beneath the surface, Mira found herself utterly unable to remain still, trapped within the confining four walls of her small apartment. Impulsively, she grabbed her coat from the closet, carefully secured the front door, and set off on foot toward Wilder Studio, located in the bustling heart of downtown. The clock had already struck 9, casting long, distorted shadows across the deserted city streets. Peering through the expansive windows of the modern brick building, She noticed a single, solitary light still burning brightly, a beacon in the surrounding darkness. Inside, she spotted Zane, completely and utterly absorbed in his work, seated alone at his drafting table, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was so deeply engrossed in his task that he didn't even register her quiet entrance. He was hunched over the table, a pencil clutched tightly in his hand, meticulously sketching something with a slow, deliberate, almost reverent precision. It was a house warm and inviting, bathed in a soft golden light, filled with vibrant, thriving plants, and echoing with the joyous sound of laughter, all beautifully frozen in time on a single piece of paper. A tangible, hopeful dream meticulously brought to life. But his eyes, despite the beautiful image he was so carefully creating, held a distant, unfocused gaze, as if his mind were wandering miles away, lost in some far-off, inaccessible place. "Zane," Mira said softly, her voice barely rising above a whisper. He jolted upright in his chair, startled by her unexpected presence in the studio. A wave of genuine surprise washed over his face, quickly followed by something far heavier and more burdensome, an undeniable sense of guilt. "Mira." She took a hesitant step closer, her eyes brimming with concern and genuine empathy. "You disappeared on us, Zane." He averted his gaze, unable to meet her questioning stare, his shoulders slumping with defeat. "I know," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. A heavy, oppressive silence descended between them, thick and suffocating, hanging in the air like a dense fog. Zane finally set the pencil down on the table with a soft click, running a weary hand through his already disheveled hair, his face etched with exhaustion. "I've been sitting here for hours," he confessed, his voice laced with a profound weariness. "Designing a space that feels like home, that looks like home. But I realized..." He paused, his voice catching in his throat. "I don't even know what home is anymore." "Not really." Mira patiently waited, allowing him the time and space he needed to gather his thoughts and find the courage to continue, offering him a silent and unwavering support. He finally looked up at her, his eyes filled with a deep-seated weariness, his voice cracking with vulnerability and raw emotion. "I'm scared, Mira," he admitted, the simple words hanging in the air like a fragile confession, exposing the depth of his inner turmoil. "What if I just end up bringing more pain into your lives? What if I fail you? Or Luna? What if I can't be enough for something this real, this important?" He stood up abruptly, pacing restlessly now, the bottled-up words finally beginning to pour out of him in a torrent, like a dam finally breaking after years of holding back the flood. "I've spent years building walls around myself, brick by painstaking brick, carefully constructing a fortress of solitude. And now you too." He gestured towards her, his hand trembling slightly. "You're the first people who have ever made me want to actually open a door, to let someone in, to tear down those walls. But what if behind that door, there's just nothing there? What if I'm just an empty shell?" Mira moved slowly toward the table, her gaze fixed on the sketch he had been so diligently working on for hours. The house on paper was far from perfect. The lines were shaky and uneven, erasures were clearly visible, imperfections that spoke volumes about the artist's inner struggles. But despite its flaws, it radiated a palpable warmth, a clear intention, a genuine heart, a testament to his inherent goodness. She gently placed her hand over the blueprint, her touch soft and reassuring, a silent promise of unwavering support. "Zane," she said quietly, her voice filled with empathy and understanding. "You already saved us once, without even realizing it, simply by being yourself, by showing us kindness and compassion when we needed it most. Maybe now it's time to let us save you." Zane froze, his body rigid and tense, every muscle coiled tight. Something in her voice, a note of unwavering sincerity and quiet strength, cracked through the layers of fear and self-doubt that had been constricting him for so long, allowing a sliver of hope to pierce through the darkness. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not pressure or expectation, but a profound understanding, a mirror reflecting his own hurt, his own struggles, and his own slow, arduous journey toward healing. He saw not judgment but acceptance. His chest rose and fell with a deep, shuddering breath, the weight of his burdens seemingly lifting slightly with each exhale. Then, he took a decisive step forward, closing the distance between them. No more words were necessary in that moment. Zane wrapped his arms tightly around her, pulling her in close, and held her with the desperate embrace of a man who had been holding his breath for far too long, finally gasping for air, clinging to the lifeline she had offered. And Mira, she didn't speak either. She simply leaned into the embrace, resting her cheek against his chest, finding solace and comfort in his reassuring presence, in the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Outside, the city lights glowed in silent observation, casting a warm, amber hue upon the scene unfolding within the studio. Inside, two souls stood still, suspended in a moment of profound connection, a shared understanding that transcended words. And for the first time in years, Zane didn't feel like he was falling, spiraling uncontrollably into the abyss. He felt like he was finally being caught, held safe and secure in the arms of someone who truly understood the depths of his pain, someone who saw him for who he was, flaws and all, and loved him anyway. 1 month later, the air crackled with the vibrant energy of celebration, filled with the sounds of laughter and excited chatter. The grand opening of Wilder Studios' newest project had drawn a diverse crowd of families, eager journalists, and influential community leaders, all gathered to witness the culmination of Zane's vision. But for Mira, standing just beyond the pristine white ribbon arch, hand in hand with Luna, it all still felt like a dream, almost too good to be true. Rows of brightly colored, inviting homes lined the newly paved walkway, each one meticulously designed with open and airy kitchens, safe and secure play areas for children, and small, flourishing gardens, bursting with life and vibrant colors. It was a village built on the solid foundation of hope, specifically designed for women like her. Women who had faced unimaginable adversity and were bravely seeking a fresh start, a safe haven to rebuild their lives. Luna clutched her hand tightly, her eyes wide with wonder and excitement, taking in the colorful scene before her. Her face lit up with pure, unadulterated joy. She was wearing her favorite pink dress, the hem slightly crooked where she had stubbornly insisted on fixing it herself, a testament to her fiercely independent spirit. "This is where moms and kids can be safe, right, Mommy?" she whispered, her voice filled with innocent hope and a touch of trepidation. Mira nodded, her throat tightening with emotion, overwhelmed by the significance of the moment, by the tangible realization of Zane's dream. "That's right, baby," she managed to say, her voice thick with tears. On the main stage, Zane stood tall and composed in a slate blue suit, one hand gripping the microphone firmly, the other fidgeting nervously behind his back, betraying the depth of his emotions. His usual calm and collected demeanor had been replaced by something far more vulnerable and exposed. Anticipation, maybe even a touch of nerves, as he prepared to share his vision with the world. "Before we officially cut the ribbon," he said, his voice projecting clearly across the crowd, his eyes scanning the audience, searching for two specific faces, "I want to acknowledge two very important people, people who have inspired this project and made it all possible. Without them, this dream would have remained just that, a dream." He paused, taking a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to say, allowing the moment to fully sink in. "Would Mira Lane and Luna please join me on stage?" Mira blinked in surprise, her heart skipping a beat at the unexpected invitation, her cheeks flushing with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. Luna squealed with delight, her face beaming with an ear-to-ear grin. "Come on, Mommy." They climbed the short steps leading to the stage, their footsteps echoing in the sudden hush of the crowd, the silence amplifying the significance of their presence. Zane met them at the center, his smile soft but still tinged with a hint of uncertainty, his eyes conveying a depth of emotion that words could not express. The crowd quieted, waiting with bated breath, sensing that something truly special was about to unfold. Then, he bent down, pulling something from behind the podium, revealing a handcrafted dollhouse, no taller than Luna's knees. It was an exact miniature replica of the model home standing proudly behind them, a testament to his unwavering attention to detail and his deep desire to create something truly meaningful, something that would capture the essence of his vision. But inside the open layout of the dollhouse were three small figures, lovingly crafted from wood and wire. A woman with bright yellow yarn hair, a little girl in a vibrant pink dress, and a man in a simple gray jacket. Luna gasped, clapping her hands with unbridled joy, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "That's us!" she shouted, her voice filled with pure, unadulterated excitement, her face radiating happiness. Laughter rippled through the audience, easing the tension, but Zane didn't look away from Mira. His gaze locked on hers, conveying a depth of emotion that words simply could not express. A silent promise of love, commitment, and unwavering support. He knelt down, still holding the dollhouse securely with one hand, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "No ring," he said softly, a playful glint in his eyes, a subtle attempt to lighten the mood. "I know it's not traditional." Instead, he took out a delicate silver key charm, its surface gleaming in the warm afternoon sun, reflecting the hope and promise of the future. Simple but undeniably beautiful. "Mira," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This isn't about saving anymore, about rescuing each other from the darkness. It's about living, truly living, and building a life together. A life filled with love, laughter, and shared dreams." He looked at Luna, then back at Mira, his eyes filled with hope and unwavering commitment, his voice resonating with sincerity. "And I want to live that life with you both, by your side, every step of the way, through the good times and the bad, forever and always." The charm trembled slightly in his fingers, a small but visible sign of the depth of his emotions, the vulnerability he was allowing himself to express. Mira's eyes brimmed with tears, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude, overwhelmed by the depth of Zane's feelings and the magnitude of the moment. For a long beat, she could not speak, completely overcome by the weight of the moment. Then, she dropped to her knees beside him and wrapped her arms tightly around his neck, whispering through a radiant smile, "Yes, Zane. Yes, I will." Luna jumped into their arms, giggling wildly, her laughter echoing through the air, a joyful symphony that celebrated their union. "Family!" she shouted loud enough for everyone to hear, solidifying their bond in front of the world, claiming her rightful place in their newly formed family. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause, a wave of support and celebration washing over them, filling the air with joy and goodwill. But for Zane, all sound faded away, replaced by the sweet sound of Luna's infectious laughter and the comforting presence of Mira, the woman who had single-handedly brought light back into his carefully ordered world, shattering the darkness that had consumed him for so long, showing him that it was okay to feel, to love, and to be loved in return. Beneath the vast October sky, surrounded by homes built with unwavering hope and the promise of a brighter future, Zane Wilder had finally found his own. A place where he belonged. A place where he was unconditionally loved. A place he could finally, without reservation, call home. Thank you for joining us on this heartfelt journey of courage, healing, and unexpected love. Zane, Mira, and little Luna remind us that sometimes the people we set out to save end up saving us right back, in ways we could never have imagined, teaching us invaluable lessons about love, forgiveness, and the power of human connection. If this story moved you, inspired you, or simply warmed your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness and Love Tales for more touching stories just like this every week. We bring you moments that prove that love can indeed bloom in the most surprising and unexpected places, even in the darkest of times. Until next time, be kind to one another, love deeply and without reservation, and never, ever stop believing in the transformative power of second chances.